Welcome to another live episode, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, episode 423. I am your host, Michael. Joining me this evening, Daniel from 4 Boxing News and the subscriber, um, Gail from nyfights.com. She'll join us shortly. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Boxing Report, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, live YouTube show, podcast, blog, website, etc., talking all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science in any form or fashion, it will get discussed. If you want to find out any and all information about Pound for Pound Boxing Report, please go to the site, p4pboxingreport.com. If you wish to email us, you can with questions, suggestions, thoughts, etc. You can do so, p4pboxing at p4pboxing, at p4pboxingreport.com. On the site, you'll find where to find Pound for Pound Box Report all over the social media, links to the YouTube channel, links to the Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, IG page, also links to where to find the podcast, um, whether it's Spotify, whether it's Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, you should be able to find Pound for Pound Box Report. If you wish to contribute, got a Cash Me PayPal donation links. It would matter to us $1, $2, $5, $10. It will help us out greatly behind the scenes. From a production standpoint, last but certainly not least, for my fitness enthusiasts, the holidays are coming up. If you want a program to get your body right or to help keep the pounds off, please check out the link to BODI, formerly known as Beachbody On Demand. Programs for any and all suitable interest. If you're looking for a weightlifting specific program, check out programs like Lift 4 and Lift More. If you're looking for hardcore functioning, hit CrossFit style workouts, please check out programs like 645, 6 weeks of the work. If you're looking for a boxing specific program, please check out 10 Rounds. That is a 6-week program, 3 days a week of boxing based cardio, 2 days a week of weightlifting, resistance work, or at the very least, take advantage of the free 14-day trial, which runs throughout the year, and that is for 14 days. If you decide to use the free trial for 14 days, you'll get free access to any and all programs on BODI Body. Let's get things going this evening, Daniel. And the reason I named this particular episode Getting Blitzed is because that's kind of what happened with a couple of fights. On one card in particular, don't have many fights to talk about since we've been doing this basically 48 hours after all the events took place over the weekend, right? Let's go to the forum specifically. Uh, we previewed, right? The Golden Boy card headlined by Alexis Rocha and Giovani Santillan. And I thought that Rocha would pretty much win this bout. Didn't turn out to be the case as Santillan. Remember how can I compare this? Remember how Jaime Munguia just sprung out of nowhere seemingly and just destroyed Saddam Ali back in the day, burst on the scene to win the junior middleweight title. I got that same vibe in watching the way in which Santillan from opening bell didn't just win against Rocha, beat him up in the process in round two. I think it was a 6 round stoppage. I didn't see that coming. I'm guessing fans of Rocha didn't as well. Rocha was highly ranked at 147 pounds, was talking about wanting to fight Terrence Crawford. That all goes away now as Rocha, yeah, he got bodied, he got dog walk, he got molly walk.
That's one way of putting it, because the main thing that happened when it comes to this type of fight, first of all, we got to give kudos to Golden Boy, because this is one of the examples of what things that they do. They like to actually challenge their guys when it's their guys. Like, well, you mentioned Munguia, that's more of a Zanfer situation. But with Golden Boy, they're not afraid to test the waters. They did it. Remember, they did it with Rocha. They did it with Rashidi Ellis. They're willing to test the waters, and they're willing not to play it safe. So we have to give them kudos for that. That being said, that beating that he got from Santillan, it was a work of art because he beat Rocha at his own fight. He went in, got close to the phone booth, and went body shot for body shot, hook for hook, power shot, jab for jab.
Yeah.
And ultimately, unfortunately, what happened is Rocha's style mainly, two things happened. Rocha's style started to catch up with him because unfortunately, Rocha does have the style of I'm willing to eat 2 or 3 punches to get one of my end. And we've seen how that has fared with other fighters. And it looks like in this case, it caught up with him. The second thing with Santillan is it's a change in trainers. Remember, they brought in Robert Garcia to come in to be the head trainer. And you could tell just in the rate of volume and how crisp his punches were. And the fact that he was able to answer Rocha whenever Rocha was able to get any type of comeback. And it ultimately broke Rocha down. I think it was in the 6th round where he got 2 very nice knockdowns. And then the 3rd one where Rocha just fell on his knees. And that was enough for Jack Reese to just say, that's enough. Yeah, that it does take away, unfortunately, the Terrence Crawford mandatory for Rocha, but Santillan now has that shot. Does it mean he has any better chance against Bud? Not likely, but it does produce another strong power puncher at welterweight, and it can actually give Rocha time to recover and ultimately rebuild, try to see what he can do better on defense because he was up to the point, the 6th round, he was still trading with Santillan shot for shot. It's just unfortunately, eventually it broke down.
Indeed, indeed. I'm sorry I had to bring Gail on. She came on at a perfect timing. We're talking about Santillan's win over Alexis Rocha. You kind of forecasted this last week when we previewed the show and saying that you thought that Santillan would give Rocha a very tough fight. He did more than that. He beat him up from pillar to post, Gail.
He certainly did. Let me just clarify. It's Giovani Santillan.
Santillan, excuse me.
Name. You know, he is from San Diego. I've seen him. He works out here. Now that a little less, now that he's been making the 2.5-hour drive up to Robert Garcia's gym in Moreno Valley. I've made that trip many, many times. Santillan had the tools, and he's just a steady, calm performer, which gave him every chance in the world against Rocha. But where the hell has this version of him been all this time? Damn, I was impressed. If that change was created by the offensive-minded Robert Garcia, props to them both. And props to Santillan's dad, Memo, who had been training him along with some, local folks, local sparring, but realized that Giovani needed more help to get to the next level. And by God, he did. I have never seen him fight that aggressive. He came at Rocha from the opening bell and he never let up. He threw Rocha off immediately and he just never got his mind straight and never got his feet back under him. Rocha's only loss before this was a very narrow split decision to Rashidi Ellis. He has never been beaten up like this. So bravo to Santillan. He's suddenly a local hero all of a sudden. And for a town on the border with a lot of interest in boxing, there are not a lot of hometown, home-born fighters who've made it to the top ranks. I'd love to see what he could do. Santillan is a product of the club fight scene. He's a former Thompson boxing fighter before Top Rank signed him. You know, he didn't have a storied amateur career. He didn't get to go to the Olympics, and I don't think he even tried. He came up the hard way, you know, and it's finally paying off for him. Good for him. He's got a lot of options in front of him. Unfortunately, Rocha kind of has to go back to the starting line. He's young. He's, you know, still in his mid-20s. He can do it. Does he want to do it? Because it's going to be a long, hard climb back.
Deflating, not from just a physical standpoint, but from a psychological standpoint, right? Confidence is taking a shot for sure. Riding high and talking big, right? And then you, in this scenario where you get just destroyed like this, it's going to take a while from him to recover from Santillan. Thanks for the correction, Gail. Yeah, he's right in the mix suddenly at 147, even 140 if he decides to drop down. He is a player for sure. On the undercard, Gail, look, we've talked about Gabriela Fundora here on Pound for Pound Box Report and how she has, I hate to use freak in this way. My apologies for that, but I can't think of a better word to use at this time in terms of her size and her length for a women's flyweight / junior bantamweight, right? She fought Ireli Mucino for Mucino's IBF flyweight title, and just like Santillan was impressive in his win over Rocha, same thing for Fundora in a win over Mucino, who's very experienced and I think was very good. Uh, the impression I got, the thing that popped in my mind afterwards, she stopped her in Fundora stopped her in 5. The impression I got is, given her physical dimension, given her personality, right, we may have a new women's boxing star on the scene. Uh, won a belt at 112. I've already heard rumblings about her fighting particularly Marlon Esparza in a unification bout. I don't know if anyone can beat her, can beat Fundora at 112. And I'll go so far as to say that she's going to be a handful for anybody from at 112, 115, 108 who's thinking about moving up. She has to look, Fundora, Gail, of a future force in women's boxing.
Yeah. Gabriela, if it isn't obvious from the last name, is the younger sister of Sebastian Fundora. Her parents have been in boxing and have both, including mom, fought professionally. So she's grown up in it from day one, and kind of reminds me a little bit of the Caroline Dubois situation with her brother Daniel, in that the sisters might be better than the brothers. and Sebastian is his sister's biggest supporter. They spar together. He says she kicks his ass regularly, which is hilarious to me. Um, and she clearly has the mindset of somebody focused, has the physical tools. Yeah, she's in the same way, you know, as tall as her brother. She is at 112, she's 5'9". 112 and 5'9", that's like Kate Moss dimensions, except it's all muscle.
Most dudes at 112 ain't that tall.
Most dudes at 112, well, most guys at 112 are,
most guys that lightweight ain't that tall.
I can look them in the eye, right? At 112, they're 5'2", 3'4". Bam Rodriguez is 5'4". She's 5'9", and she towers, you know, over her opponents at this point. She will start being competitive as she moves up. I'm sure she thinks to herself, I'm just going to steadily go up, collect belts. She can certainly go up in weight. She is only 21 years old, so she's got loads of upside and loads of future runway in front of her. She's aggressive. She's a powerful puncher. She has excellent footwork, and she's just plain fearless. And she and her family now, they've moved from the Coachella Valley where they lived for a long, long time. They bought, from what I understand, a huge sort of ranch property in Tehachapi, sort of the north of Riverside area in the hills. And what does Gabriela do on her off time? She goes hunting with a bow and arrow for game. That's what she does on her off time.
That's
And
such a
I
badass thing to
understand.
do. That's such a
I
badass thing to do.
It
Oh
is,
my
and I
gosh.
understand she is wicked, wicked good at it. And the funniest thing, similar to her brother, if you see them outside the ring, in their civilian attire, she wears the big glasses. Her hair is all turned back and braided off her face, and she looked after the fight. First of all, she didn't have a mark on her face. After the fight, she was, dressed in her street clothes, posing with her brother and this and that. She looked like she'd just been to the library. You would never pick her out as a powerhouse. So she's personable. She's active on social media. She's super approachable. Friends, if you ever see her at a fight, walk up to her. You can't miss her. And she is delighted to greet fans. She likes every post about her. She communicates. She's definitely a star in the making. I think one of the few fighters that probably is in her way right now is Seniesa Estrada. And I'm sure, and they're both in Southern California. Believe me, they know each other. It's going to be an interesting situation should their paths cross. I think she takes care of just about everybody else until she maybe gets up, closer to Amanda Serrano territory. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much longer Amanda's going to be in the fight game. So they may not, their timelines may not cross, but it's going to take another 2 or 3 divisions outside of Estrada, in my opinion, before she's really challenged very much.
Here's hoping that Golden Boy Daniel learns from their mistakes when it comes to the aforementioned Seniesa Estrada, right? And what I mean by that is that they had something in their hands when it comes to Super Bad, and they fumbled the bag, right? And Seniesa left and went with Bob Arum, and her platform, Seniesa, is at an all-time high. They have their chance again when it comes to Fundora. Let's hope she doesn't mess it. They don't mess it up with her like they did with Seniesa, because based on this performance, she did anything she wanted. She wanted in there with Mucino. Boxed her when Mucino tried to box. Fedora's like, okay, I'm gonna get you with this reach, with this size. And then once she found out that she could basically do that, it was a wrap. She just basically walked her down and chopped her up to pieces.
Oh, yeah, that was not exactly a fair performance from Mucino. But one of the things probably that she did count on was Fundora being starstruck by the moment. Because, like Gail mentioned, she's 21 years old, very low key, and you're in now in a big title fight. Yeah, you're not on the main. You're not the main event, but you're still key title in a division that looks to be very crowded. And not only did she show poise, the dimensions were insane. Because I'm gonna go to the NBA on this. The person that's probably gonna win Rookie of the Year is Victor Wembanyama of the San Antonio Spurs, and his dimensions are insane to the point where there's like video now of the Dallas Mavericks when they're training to meet the Spurs. Ultimately, one of their coaches has on like little stretch arms to simulate Wembanyama's arms. That looked exactly what we were looking at when we were seeing him with Fundora. But it wasn't just wild punches. It was poised. It was measured. and it was precise. She didn't throw
Right.
just for the sake of throwing. And when you're that economical, when you're that focused at that age, you are gonna go places. And Oscar, yeah, does have to watch out because we have to remember there already is another promoter with an inside track thanks to her brother, PBC. If they mess it up, Al Heyman's gonna snatch her up very, very quickly. Because unfortunately he doesn't have a lot of female fighters in his stable where you can say the PBC is going into. That's mostly got in the top rank and Matchroom. And now Golden Boy maybe with this situation. And it also could go another way. They can also have Sebastian look at Golden Boy as the place that maybe they want to rebuild him, whether he wants to go stay at 154 or try to go up at 160. So there's a lot of options there for both Gabriela and Sebastian. But Gabriela, you can tell she is the hungrier of the two. And she fought like she was avenging the honor of the Fundora name after Sebastian's brutal knockout in the hands of Brian Mendoza. This is going to be an interesting fighter to watch. And Marlon, Sinicia, Valle, they're all three of them have their eyes on this young lady.
Absolutely, absolutely. As of right now, the fight with Esparza, that's the obvious choice in the immediate, let's just say 6 to 12 months. And correct me if I'm wrong, that would be for undisputed at 112, right?
12.
I think, well, no. Let me see. Sinicia, how many belts does she have? I think she has the WBC.
Sinicia's champion at she's a champion at 105.
Yeah, she is
105,
not.
sorry.
She is not a.
Oh, I'm thinking of I'm thinking of Marlon. Yeah,
right.
Marlon I think has the WBC belt.
Yeah, Marlon is
and the
not undisputed or have the rest of those.
Okay, I thought she was unified champion. I had more than one belt. My apologies.
No, not at all. So at 112, Kenya Enriquez is the WBC interim. Marlon is the WBC WBO holder. I take that back. She does have the other 3 belts.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I think Gabriela mows that girl down. I don't think she should be too anxious to take that on. But and Marlon, really wants that. She is very interested in some other names that aren't Gabriela Fundora. I mean, she wants that rematch with Sinicia, something fierce. She really does, because Sinicia embarrassed her. That's where a lot of it's heading. They've trash talk each other. I don't know exactly what the discussion behind the scenes is to put that together, especially now that Sinicia's moved on to Top Rank. But Sinicia, on the other hand, while Marlon's looking at Sinicia is looking at Yokasta Valle, who right. I think is also a handful for her. Yokasta has put on some great performances. So,
and Sinicia, based on her last couple of fights, she had that unique style that people had no answers for. But it seems as the more she fights, the more folks are starting to figure her out, solve the puzzle that is Sinicia. And yeah,
she right now
I wouldn't put Fundora in there with super bad now. Just not the right timing from a financial perspective.
But and Sinicia is recovering surgery on her hand, so she is not going to be taking on these top level threats anytime soon. She's going to need a tune-up fight first, no matter what happens, and to see where things go. And I can't help but think about how Canelo's comeback from his surgery went. It took him a couple of fights, and he has said this himself very openly that he didn't feel quite right until the Charlo fight. So people had their doubts watching him against John Ryder thinking, what's going on there? And he says his hand wasn't right, when he fought Golovkin the third time. So, even a tune-up fight might not be enough. Seniesa and her team need to be very careful. I also think sometimes, a fighter like Gabriela, for example, they can fight with nothing to lose. Absolutely nothing to lose and everything to gain. You get those belts, you get a reputation, you are a jewel in your promoter's lineup. Suddenly you have a lot to lose, and sometimes you can fight a little too protectively. But I sometimes think that's what's happening to Seniesa.
I tend to agree. I tend to agree. Let's move from those two fights on that card in Inglewood to Liverpool, England. Daniel and Gail, Jack Catterall fighting Jorge Linares, and I covered this fight for card for this fight for Three Kings Boxing. Please check out threekingsboxing.com. The source for pure unadulterated boxing information. Shout out to everybody over there at Three Kings Boxing. 2K, the man who runs Three Kings Boxing, Bo, who you heard on this show numerous times, head of media relations, senior writer, Bakari, senior writer, I'm a senior writer, Red, who does a lot of the editing for our stuff behind the scenes, and all the contributors behind the scenes. I'm watching this fight. Catterall looked good, Daniel and Gail, but it was obvious that Jorge Linares is not the fighter that he once was. 38 years old. He looked spectacular from a physical standpoint, but he just couldn't let the shots go. And Catterall had his way. Linares basically announced his retirement afterwards. Following the win, Catterall and Eddie Hearn was talking up a rematch with Josh Taylor. But from my perspective, and I wrote about this on threekingsboxing.com, for me, the move for Catterall is go for the winner of Prograis and Haney. That fight's happening, December 9th? Taylor, coming off of the loss to Teofimo Lopez earlier this summer, doesn't have the kind of cachet standing anymore. And I think that Catterall will get more respect fighting the winner of Prograis and Haney in early 2024 than he could in a rematch against Josh Taylor.
Well, it depends on a couple of situations. First, when it comes to this fight, we talk about in sports about seeing somebody be old overnight, and sadly, that's been the case, unfortunately, with Jorge Linares, because every time I saw the punches, because this wasn't what Rocha and Santillan was. This wasn't what Fundora and Mucino was, which was a more action oriented bout. This was more of a tactical, technical fight. But you could tell just looking at the way he shot things that the Linares of 5 years ago would have been quicker in his defensive reflexes, would have landed the right hand a little bit more and with a little bit more oomph than what happened in this fight. And he probably would have tried to figure out Catterall a little bit faster, because unfortunately that was not the case with him in this event, because you could tell like the mind was there. His body wasn't there as far as what he wanted to react. It just didn't react fast enough. And the sad part about it is, unfortunately, is that's a lot of times the fighters got to go, and he's got a hell of a career. It'll be interesting to see how his case for the Hall of Fame is going to be, but there is credibility in that argument. As far as what Catterall's facing next, this depends on what you want to do. If you're confident enough to go to unification bouts, yeah, you target the winner of Rougarou and Haney. But we know that the UK fight scene is a scene that is very fertile and has enough cachet, has enough economics where it can support a domestic fight on its own. And that's what the Josh Taylor fight is. It's a domestic fight on its own. And there's enough interest, there's enough intrigue, and enough controversy from the first fight to be able to drive it home. The only question, unfortunately, is in this case is, unfortunately, when it goes to the promoters, because you're dealing with the same ones either way. If it's with Catterall, okay, you work with Eddie, whether it's with Rougarou or with Haney. If you're dealing with Taylor, that's a little difficult because it's either top rank or it's boxer at this point. And sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to negotiate. But there's a case for both. I personally would love for him to fight the winner of Prograne Haney, because depending on who comes out of that fight, it's probably going to be the more weaker champion if you want to unify. And, you know, there's also good old Tank Davis still lurking around. But Catterall may be a little bit too technical for Tank.
What say you, Gail, about the future of Catterall following this win over Linares? A catchweight fight with Taylor, or should he go for the winner of Prograis and Haney?
I think the Prograis Haney winner is problematic for Catterall. But you know, Taylor at a catchweight, I think, is a little problematic. So I'm not quite sure what the best path is for him. I do think the bigger money for him is in staying with domestic opponents. You know, the British versus, you know, the British on British violence fights do incredibly well. Big crowds in the UK. Far more than there would be of interest. You know, let's imagine Devin Haney wins. Haney versus Catterall in the US doesn't move the needle very much, to be honest. So I think Catterall and his team need to think very carefully, and he needs to decide, is he fighting more for legacy? Is it the point of his career where he needs to make bank, you know, against his future when he's out of boxing? Because now's the time, if that's important to him. And he keeps calling out Taylor. I mean, the first words out of the man's mouth after a fight, Taylor, you know, he talked some shit about Taylor immediately. That's where his mind is. Now, whether his promoter and his team decide that's the best opponent for him, it's a completely different discussion.
Indeed, we will see where it goes. But more than likely, despite my calls for him to go for the winner of the December 9th bout between Regis Prograis and Devin Haney, the way that Catterall and Eddie Hearn was talking, you more than likely will see a rematch with Taylor at some point in the first, I would say, quarter of 2024, at some catch weight, maybe 143, 144, in and around there. Because to your point, Gail, um, British bad blood often equals a lot of money, and yeah, from a financial perspective, one would think that Catterall is not going to turn down the money for a rematch with Taylor at whatever weight it takes place. I'm going to move on. I didn't put any news in the docket or in the description below, so I'm going to give Gail and Daniel. I know this is early following the recent fights this weekend, but if you have any news that you want to share with the folks, the floor is yours.
Nothing cooking, everybody. A lot of us still processing the news out of Showtime and calculating really where in the landscape will the PBC go? Who are they going to work with? What's going to happen between now and the end of the year? You know, Showtime isn't quite gone yet. There is still a full calendar to look at, and there's a lot of discussion about Showtime's last few fights, which look to be mostly pay-per-views, where they're going to cram a whole ton of fights on those cards because they owe the fighters, another paycheck and another opportunity. So you're just going to see them loaded up with these odd, mid-level matchups. Keith Thurman and Amantis Stanionis, right? Danny Garcia and, gosh, now it even escapes me who the opponent is. Erislandy Lara. And you're just going to see them banging those out one after another. I'm one of those people who, would really rather eat one gourmet cookie than a bunch of stale old ones. And I think we're going to get a bag of stale old cookies here as Showtime winds down. But, HBO didn't exactly go out with a bang. I was at its very last card in Carson, California, and it did go out with a bit of a whimper. I'm afraid we might see Showtime do the same thing. I am sad for the people losing their jobs. I am not in a death spiral and crying with the covers over my head over, the future of the sport because Showtime is bowed out. I'm not worried about boxing. The people that are worried are focused on a very small portion of the boxing universe. We just talked about how vibrant, Daniel had the perfect word, how fertile the boxing scene is in the UK. It's going gangbusters. They are filling venues, they are making money, and the fans can't get enough. When we talk about worrying that Showtime's demise means boxing is dead, no. What we mean is a small segment of the American market may be floundering, but it can be fixed. Larry Merchant said it best. We said it a few weeks ago. It bears repeating. Boxing can't fix it, can't kill it. Well, we need to try to fix it. We do really need to try. And what I have found very interesting is how many fighters themselves, Terrence Crawford and Ryan Garcia being the two leading voices, saying, listen, we need to get involved, and we, the fighters, need to fix this. And I do think if they are good to their word and they're willing to follow up, and both of these guys are pretty smart, have pretty smart heads for business, they do think that's possible, and I think that's very healthy. And say what you will about, people have very strong feelings about Oscar De La Hoya, the promoter and businessman. But Oscar isn't wrong that the promoters all need to start talking to each other, and they need to stop protecting fighters. You did talk about Oscar making a mistake putting Rocha and Santillan together. I don't see it that way. I really don't. They test their guys. They forge them through a little heat. And better for them to find out what they've got to work with, where their fighters really, truly stand. Maybe they take a loss early in their career. With some fighters, with many fighters, honestly, not named Floyd Mayweather, it doesn't really matter. If the fighter is marketable, the fighter is still marketable with a loss. Fighters that aren't marketable for anything other than an undefeated record, they're in trouble because they're going to lose a fight someday. And, there are many things I do not like about the UFC, but their willingness to put guys in tough, take losses. They build fans. They build very devoted fans that way who don't give a damn whether fighters have a loss on their record. They want to see them fight if they're entertaining and if they put on a good show. That's all they give. Yes, they care about their champions, but they really care about the product. In the octagon, we need to be more concerned about the product in the ring. We really do. Rant over.
And that was Gail's TED Talk, folks.
It's my Falcon talk. It's my Falcon talk. It's my brand there, Falcon talk. That's when I just can't hold it in any longer, and you're gonna all hear it.
Yeah, so yeah, because there's really nothing to talk about, no real developments in terms of the news perspective. Let's move on and get to these fights that's happening this weekend. Uh, Trying to decide where exactly I want to start here. Um, you mentioned in our discussion about Fundora, the name you mentioned the name Amanda Serrano Gale, right? Well, she returns to the ring uh this coming Saturday against in a mandatory defense against Danila Ramos. Serrano, of course, reigning undisputed champion at 126 pounds. When this fight was announced, we had a lengthy discussion about the fact that this is going to be a 12 round fight, 3 minutes rounds, traditional world title rules that we see in the men, and much of our discussion at that time centered around Suleiman basically saying that there's no way that he would sanction a women's fight for 12 rounds, and he gave his reasons, and you can go back and on Pound for Pound Box Report, the YouTube channel, and search for that particular episode, right? Be that as it may, it's happening. Serrano's fighting Ramos this coming weekend, right? Serrano is the clear favorite. For me, Gail and Daniel, I want to see knockout here. Um, up through the Katie Taylor fight, Amanda Serrano had this reputation for not just being a solid, outstanding boxer from a skills perspective, but a punishing fighter who would take opponents out. We hadn't seen that in recent bouts from Serrano. When she won the undisputed title, she was made to fight. She was made to fight very, very hard. Right? It was a war. Went the distance in her last fight. Uh, there's been issues with her hand. Right? She's had bouts canceled. I wonder at this stage of her career whether the injury to her hands are more telling than her camp is letting out, because the power that we're accustomed to seeing for Serrano is not there, at least in her last couple of fights.
Serrano has, considerably stepped up her work rate and her opposition, and to say that you're you're disappointed in the knockouts when she is the undisputed unified world featherweight champion and barely missed becoming the world unified lightweight champion at the same time. um, I think that is it's a little tough to swallow. But Amanda's heard that too. And it is a fact that 3-minute rounds will give her much more of a chance. Let's look at the Taylor fight. She came within seconds of knocking Katie Taylor out, especially in retrospect, if you know what you're looking for and look back. She had Taylor rattled hard with just a few seconds to go. And I forget what round it was. It was a good, 2/3, 3/4 through the fight, as I recall. Um, Another minute, and she would, in fact, be the unified, undisputed lightweight champion. I did an interesting experiment aided by noted boxing numbers guy and historian Lee Groves, checking my figures and my math. If you take a fighter like an Amanda Serrano and then measure her knockout rate, which, by the way, is among the highest for women. Her knockout rate is 66.67%, which means every 2 out of 3 fights she ends by knockout. So her knockout percentage as a women's professional is outstanding. But let's compare her with some of the male knockout punchers, noted knockout punchers. And let's go through their record and throw out every fight where the knockout happened in the 3rd minute. If you said, all right, let's see how many men won their fight by knockout before the end of the second minute, just like the women. George Foreman's knockout rate, Gennady Golovkin's knockout rate dropped to almost exactly what Amanda Serrano's current knockout rate is. That tells me all we need to know about all the arguments about women not being knockout punchers. Their ratio at the top level, when you're talking power punchers versus power punchers, and not all female fighters are power punchers, not not all men are power punchers. Well, some of them are technicians and some of them are boxer punchers, emphasis on the boxer. So I think this is a marvelous idea. Amanda Serrano said essentially to the WBC, I don't really give a damn if you sanction the fight or not. And every other sanctioning organization did. So the IBF, WBA, and WBO world featherweight titles are up for consideration. WBC titles just simply not in play. And let's see what this experiment yields. 12 rounds, 3-minute rounds. I'm telling you right now, it's not going the distance. Amanda Serrano will be coming out like a freight train to prove her point. Poor Danila Ramos has never fought any level of opposition close, not even within shouting distance of Amanda Serrano. She's 38 years old. It is her first fight in the United States. She's from Brazil. She's fought in Brazil, Argentina, and Spain, with one odd fight in Oslo, Norway, against really her best opponent. In 2019, she fought Katarina Sanders and lost by split decision. So this is a big ask of her. Props to her for taking a chance, and I'm sure it's probably the best payday she's ever gotten. And she is ranked number 8 in the division, but who are we kidding? So let's see what happens. One note, the fight's on Friday night. It is not on Saturday. They're not going up against the, festivities from the Middle East this weekend. So it is on DAZN on Friday night, the card from the fabulous Caribe Royale Orlando in Orlando, Florida. And just checking to see for all of you who else is on the card of note. And it is really a lot of local fighters, prospects. So the real star of the show will be Amanda. But we could see some interesting action fights. The other fighters are all young prospects that are all young, all of them undefeated, anywhere from a 8-0 record to a 4-0 record. The only exception is Antonio Vargas, 16-1, who I believe is the older of the fighting Vargas brothers. Emiliano has sort of taken the shine away from his two brothers. But his opponent is still that guy that we all love named TBA. So we'll see if Antonio even ends up staying on the card. But hey, Friday night fights, I'm all about it.
Do you agree with Gail, Daniel, that we're about to see a Serrano on a mission?
Yeah, because it's not only the fact that she has a point to prove to a lot of doubters that say that her knockout power is gone, that it's not really what it's supposed, that it's not really what it was. It's also a point to prove to one Mauricio Suleiman. Because, we did mention that not all the belts are going to be on the line. And unfortunately, when Mauricio tried to make his case for why he did it, the way that he did it makes you want to hit your head in the brick wall. If you've kept up with a lot of the argument when it comes to men's and women's sports. And ultimately, she's going to try to prove a point, because you have to also think about this. She has wanted that rematch with Katie Taylor. She has wanted to avenge that victory that she had. Yes, I'm still saying she won. That's how close it was. And unfortunately, she's seeing Chantal Cameron be the one that gets that limelight in that area, but she still is going to want that rematch with Katie. So a lot of it's going to be on her mind, and obviously, it's mainly silencing her doubters and defending the honor of her promotion. Even though, as much as I despise the Paul brothers, they're servicing something in the sport that it does need, like because of the pay, especially when it comes to women's fighters. They're doing something right, even though I despise them as people, the Paul brothers. But ultimately, yeah, you're gonna see Amanda
Well, you
come
know,
out
a
with
dead clock is
something
right
to
twice a
prove.
day. So there you go about them.
Yeah, yeah. But you're gonna see Amanda come out with a purpose in this fight, and this is gonna be probably very, very enjoyable. And we're gonna see who she's gonna want to call out. Is she gonna want to call out Taylor, or is she gonna want to call out Cameron because Cameron now has the belts?
Indeed, yeah. So I'm excited towards this because I want to see how Serrano looks. If she's on her A game, I completely agree with Gail in that she will not just win but destroy. Uh, uh, um, she will not win, but she will just destroy and make easy work of Ramos, and that's also putting a good prospect and up and comers on that card as well. That's going to happen in Orlando, Florida, on the zone. Also on the 20 on that's going to be on the 27th. Also on the 27th, Jonathan Gonzalez, he's going to defend his WBO junior flyweight title. It was announced that that's going to be on ESPN Plus. I just mentioned it because it is a title fight of Gonzalez fighting a Zapata. Not much known of him. Clearly a voluntary, uh, title defense. I think Zapata's ranked in the lower 15 of the WBO rankings, and it just in my eye, it just looks like that this is just a fight to get Gonzalez busy and setting up hopefully a fight with uh, Kinshiro Taraji, who has two of the belts at 108 pounds. I just shared a private pic of Taraji, Gail and Daniel. Please check the private chat of Kinshiro, basically out here living his best life right now. So yeah, Jonathan Gonzalez is putting his WBO 108-pound belt on the line again, and that fight is going to be on ESPN Plus. Again, from Managua, Nicaragua. Those fights on the on the 27th, on the 28th. Um, Going back to you, Daniel. Interesting fight, in my opinion. One of the surprises of the year was Oshaki Foster. Uh, Not the fact that he won the WBC belt at 130 pounds, but the manner in which he won it over previously undefeated two division champion Ray Vargas fight, right? Um, Won with ease, dominated the more experienced, taller, older Vargas. Oshaki returns to the ring, fighting his mandatory Eduardo Hernandez. But the interesting thing about this is that it's going to happen in the mandatory challenger Hernandez country of Mexico. It's going to happen in Cancun on the zone. We're going to see here, Daniel, if Oshaki Foster is he a flash in the pan or is he a champion of real substance? I think Hernandez can crack a bit. He's going to be motivated and pumped up fighting in front of his home country. That should raise his level. If Oshaki is the real deal, he can win. We're going to see Saturday in Cancun.
Yeah, this is going to be a very telling fight because Ashaki did win and did win very clearly against Vargas, but he didn't win in the most aesthetically pleasing fashion when it comes to this fight, even though he essentially dominated Vargas. This is going to be a good test to see not only doing that, but doing that again in the home country of your mandatory challenger who probably thought he was going to be the shot with Vargas. And I've been to Cancun around this time last year. It does get pretty lively, and it gets still pretty warm in that area. It does get pretty lively in that area. So Shaki's going to have to focus a little bit more, reestablishing his jab, making sure that he doesn't really get lost a little bit in the moment, because that's also main danger when it comes to surprise champions making their first defense. A lot of times, the shock that you're defending the belt can get to you. But this should be a pretty good fight when it comes to Shockey Foster. I do expect him to win. It'll probably be fairly close, because one thing, unfortunately, about when you're fighting in your challenger's home court, you're kind of already behind the 8 ball, even as a champion. So, but I do expect the Shockey to come in, be well prepared. His footwork will be on point. I think his jab will be on point, and his targeting will be on point. And it'll be a pretty good victory, and ultimately line him up for other potential fights at 130.
Quick word on this fight, Gil.
Good test for Oshaki. I think it's going to be a tough one, competitive. I've gone back and forth about who I think is the favorite. Rocky Hernandez. A little like Alexis Rocha had to build himself back up after a kind of a shocking loss. He first came to the United States, touted as this next great thing in the lower weight classes, and promptly lost. So he's been crawling his way back and doing very nicely. If Shaki is willing to go to his home turf, good for him, because in Mexico, where there is a very fervent fan base for boxing, it's a bigger deal. This fight would never in a million years be the main event in the United States, unless it was a club card. So he's willing to take that shot. Good for him. But Rocky's at home, home cooking can sometimes be an advantage. So I think it'll be interesting, competitive. Not sure exactly how it's going to go. The rest of the card are some competitive 10-rounders against folks trying to keep their careers alive. Andrew Tabiti, heavyweight, is in the co-main, I believe. Journeyman, longtime veteran Oscar Escandon is also on the card. And hey, you like the Mexican fight scene? We thank DAZN for bringing it to us. Both DAZN and ESPN, credit to them, have picked up a lot more international broadcasts. They just simply pick up the feed. Sometimes they have their own commentators, sometimes they don't. And I'm very grateful. Wasn't too many years ago, you had to try to scramble to find some kind of video feed, or not long before that. I mean, there just simply didn't exist. You didn't see them at all. So we're treated to fights from all over the world these days. It's a good thing for boxing.
And last but certainly not least, I am loath to talk about this because I don't think it's a real quote unquote fight. But given who's participating in this matchup, Tyson Fury and Francis Ngannou, right? I guess we have to discuss it. I guess they're going to fight on the 28th in the Middle East. Though it's not an exhibition technically, I think it is personally. The question is, Gail and Daniel. The issue for me, Gail and Daniel, is whether Fury is unscathed at the end of this, because if he is and nothing happens to him or whatnot from a physical standpoint, up next is on the cards at least, a fight versus a fight for a fight against Usyk for undisputed.
Listen, these fights make money. That's why they happen. People watch them. There's an audience for it. I think even among those of us who, don't love the fact that the lineal WBC heavyweight champion of the world and the arguably one of its most popular personalities, is stalling on a unification fight for a money grab. Some of us don't love it. On the other hand, boxing is a business. It's called prize fighting for a reason. There is an appetite. If there wasn't an audience, paying audience, stuff wouldn't happen. So we're going to get it, whether we like it or not. The question is, whether any of us are just damn curious enough to pay is it $80 to see the fight along with its undercard fights, which for those who are curious, features a whole lot of heavyweight bouts. You have a British Commonwealth title fight between Fabio Wardley and David Adelaide, and that's the co-main. Joseph Parker's in action. Carlos Takam and Martin Boccoli. Okay, there you go.
Wow.
Paydays for these guys. You do have Arslanbek Makhmudov in action versus Junior Wright. That's a little bit interesting. Moses Aitama, who's an up-and-coming heavyweight prospect. And then you've got this one lone junior middleweight fight, Jack McGann and Alcibiade Duran. So who are we kidding? You're not tuning in to see Takam versus Boccoli. And you're probably not tuning in to see Fabio Wardley. You're tuning in to see the craziness between Tyson Fury and Francis Ngannou. You would think fans, even though they're intrigued by this stuff, would think long and hard about spending $80. And if the budget permits and you want to put a match to it, have at it. I don't care. If you're taking that away from, your emergency savings fund or your retirement or your groceries or your bills, no, you shouldn't do it. Because why? Because Mayweather, McGregor. Why? Because of any of these stunt fights, they all end up like this, right? They all end up like this, where, a mixed martial artist thinks their skills transfer to the boxing ring, and they do not. They never do. However, let's just visit this little fantasy for just a minute because it's just so damn funny to me. Let's say that Francis Buster Ngannou has lightning strike and he beats Tyson Fury. Okay? Which would, just for laughs, play along with me. The WBC did not sanction this fight. They refused to sanction this fight. And you can say a lot of things about Mauricio Suleiman, but not being a very intelligent man isn't one of them. You would not want to ruin the Fury versus Usyk fight with the loss of his belt. So even in the unlikely circumstances that Fury loses, it's still a unification fight against Usyk. However, what does happen in the event of an Ngannou win is he becomes, yes, the lineal heavyweight champion of the world. And part of me would just love to see that shit go down.
Wow.
Just for the joke of it. Think about that for a second. And I can't help but think of some of the personalities over ESPN who've been flogging Fury as the lineal. I think Mark Kriegel might actually have a seizure if that happens. Or Joe Tessitore. Boys would just not be able to handle it. I think this is just so funny. All right. Do we ever think it's going to happen? No. But boxing is the theater of the unexpected. You want to step into our realm, you just never know. Listen, you find this stuff crazy entertaining and you have the money to spend. I don't begrudge anyone wanting to do it. I will say on behalf of New York Fights, those of us on the staff are very happy that the boss is falling on the sword for us, and he will be covering it and he will be live tweeting it. So if you want to know what's going on, follow Mike Woods, aka Woodsy, and NY Fights on the X, and we'll have it for you.
Any words on this, Daniel? I
Okay.
think that size said it all.
First of all, yeah, it's entertaining, and yeah, the card is ludicrously filled with heavyweights. None of whom, by the way, will ever be who are not going to be close at this current stage. This fight will not make them in line for either Fury or Usyk. But it's just mainly one of the ways that I've tried to talk myself into just at least begrudgingly accepting the fight is just mainly for just the sport of boxing just taking more measured revenge for what happened with James Toney in the UFC.
I mean, speaking of
That's
James
what.
Tony, he is fighting Razor Ruddock, so there's a comparison.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the bad part. But here's the part where we all need to understand something on it. Fury's already lined up the first excuse in trying to get out of it. This quote unquote signed fight with Usyk. Because apparently he put out a quote saying that Usyk has to fight him in December, not giving him enough time to train after fighting this, only giving for the guy who actually has more of the belts less than 5 weeks to train. I'm sorry, get the fuck out of here.
You know Usyk. Oh, Usyk's smarter than that. He stayed in the gym.
Oh
He
no,
will
we
be
know
ready
that, but
whenever.
no, either way, this is just another excuse. Another excuse because let's be blunt. Fury is right now at this stage too pussy to fight Usyk. Sorry, but he's too much. He just doesn't want to fight Usyk. He's gonna find another excuse of it. Hell, it would not surprise me if he winds up going to the Royal Rumble in Phoenix as a means to avoiding Usyk. That's what I think when it comes to Tyson Fury in this fight. Now, Francis Ngannou, get your money, man. Fuck Dana White in every single sense of the word for what he did. But this is what it is. It is a money fight. Think about it, folks. It's in the Middle East. It's a money fight. It's not really meant to be a thirst pleasing. And while a part of me does wish for the level of chaos that Gail put out into the world and having Francis Ngannou knock out Tyson Fury, that would do probably a lot more to damage boxing as a whole. Is that something that happens in that? Luckily, it won't. It shouldn't, because we've seen it over and over again that when MMA fighters had to actually fully dedicate to Queensborough rules of boxing, it doesn't fare very well for them. Hell, we just literally saw it, unfortunately, again with the Paul brothers with Dylan Dennis. But it is what it is. Like I said, I'm just waiting for Fury to start lining up excuses to get out of the Usyk fight.
Before we get ready to sign off here, question here from want to put it here publicly. MG is here. He asked, "I'm sorry, I'm late. Have you already talked about the show about Showtime closing their doors to boxing? What will happen to PBC now?" Gail, Daniel, for anybody who want to answer MG's question, please do so.
I did answer it in the chat, and I'll repeat it here for everybody. There is no way Showtime would have announced their closure of their network without already having another deal well in the works. Perhaps not every I dotted, T crossed, and signature on the line, but there's certainly a deal formulating, and the money is all on some kind of arrangement with Amazon Prime. Amazon Prime has been moving very aggressively into live sports. For all of you have noticed, deals with the NFL, deals with the NBA, deals picking up other live sports, because whether it's major American leagues or the Premier League, which has made quite a foothold on streaming services, NBC and Peacock in particular, but also ESPN has picked some of it up. You can find that stuff anywhere at this point. International soccer. Peacock itself has picked up a lot of the Olympic sports outside the Olympic years, as running it very aggressively. Those are tent poles, must-see appointments on streaming services that keep people from doing the cycling, rotating subscriptions, which is what's happening a lot now. Is somebody picks up Amazon or Apple TV or Max or Paramount Plus or Hulu, Disney Plus, right? That's a lot of money if you pay for all of those at the premium level. But what you can do is buy them for a month, binge everything you want to see, run through the lineup of stuff that interests you for a month, and then you cancel it. You go on to the next one. So you're only really with one network at a time, maybe two. To keep you there, a steady diet of live sports that, sort of expire. Yes, you could go back and watch them on demand, but chances are pretty good you know what happened. And you kind of ruin spending time watching it when there's nothing, there's no mystery, there's no drama about the outcome. So sports is a good buy, even at very high licensing fees, which seem to us, outrageous. They're willing to make the investment. So this is not a surprise to me, and it makes a lot of sense. It really does economically. If Amazon Prime is trying to deliver these live sports tentpoles, that they might just try it with boxing. Boxing is not expensive to produce from a network's point of view. From the promoter's point of view, it might be another story. But maybe this will also cause them to get a little bit of handle on some of the purses, some of the extras, and some of the other things they do. But
And I think,
I say this, I could be wrong about Amazon Prime. I'm not wrong about PBC and Al Heyman. He has something in the works. He always lands on his feet. We can trust in that for sure.
And I think we're going to end things on that note. You were going to ask something, Daniel?
Yeah, that's mainly the main thing. But this has been in the grapevine, unfortunately, for months. Those of us that have been in the know, we knew this was coming when it came to months. It's kind of sad seeing it go, especially Showtime sports in general going away. But like Gil mentioned, Amazon Prime could be a player. They're already a player when it comes to the NBA and the NFL. They might be a player when it comes to WWE coming into it. So they're getting ready to do serious business. And I mentioned it when we talked about them last time, is they already have a built-in subscriber base because of the fact that people that use Amazon Prime as e-commerce, not just a streaming service. They already have something built in that they can actually use. So it is going to be something that we need to see. It is, like I said, it's a little bit sad seeing Showtime go, because it is the end of an era of the premium cable channels being the homes of major cards in boxing. But as Harold Letterman said, boxing is a sport. Nothing can save it, but yet nothing can kill it.
And I think that's a good way to end off this show. I want to thank MG is here, Trap Media USA, for their comments and their questions in the live chat. If you've not done so already, please make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. To do so will help the overall algorithms behind the scenes, get us closer to being monetized. I'm going to go around the panel here. Even though we didn't start this particular episode with ladies first, we're going to end with ladies first. Gail, from NY Fights. Let the folks know where to find you to talk anything boxing related.
Couldn't be easier. nyfights.com is where my local coverage, my boxing coverage, local or otherwise, appears. I'll be covering the Friday Serrano card. like I said, the boss will be keeping an eye on the shenanigans from Saudi Arabia, and we'll live tweet and probably do live round by round recaps if you don't want to spend your $80, but you're curious. And you can find me on all the social medias. I'm not too tough to look up.
I go to you, Daniel, from Four Boxing News and the Inscriber. For anybody who wants to talk the sweet science, for anybody who wants to talk uh, uh, pro wrestling, for anybody who want to talk the NBA, especially when it comes to the Miami Heat, let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Yes, folks, still on Twitter, Rux99, RWKUZ99. Catch me on there. I'm also there on Mastodon. I'm there on Blue Sky now, on Threads. So I am preparing myself for the eventual, unfortunately, downfall of Twitter, the way Elon wants to run things. But we always got to keep it safe. We always got to keep in mind. And ultimately, hopefully, we end this year in a bang.
Indeed, indeed. For those who want to talk boxing, music, fitness, you know what it is with me on Twitter, because I refuse to call it X, Brother JR76. For those who want to talk boxing, music, and fragrance with me on IG and TikTok, you can do so, Brother JRSC. On the next episode, we will do a recap of Amanda Serrano and her title defense against Ramos, Oshaki Foster, his title defense against Eduardo Hernandez, Jonathan Gonzalez, his title defense against Gerardo Zapata, and we will do a preview of fights that's going to take place on the weekend of November 4th. Subriel Matias, which I think is going to be a fantastic fight. He's making first defense of the IBF 140-pound title against Shohei Ergashev. I think again, look for that. Just be on the lookout for that fight. Both guys can punch. Both guys have a mean streak. They fight with bad intentions, and they rarely take a backward step. I think it has fight of the year potential. You heard it here first. That's going to happen in Las Vegas on the 4th. Also on that same day in Cardiff, Wales, Joe Cordina making a mandatory title defense against Edward Vasquez on the undercard. Sivanati Noshinga going to make the second defense of the IBF 108-pound belt. And also highly ranked junior middleweight Suleiman Sissoko, French highly ranked French junior middleweight. He's going to fight on that card as well, fighting a guy by the name of Lucero. So again, I want to thank everybody who joined us in the live chat. Appreciate you, and thank you once again for your questions and your comments. For Gil of nyfights.com, Daniel for Boxing News and the Inscriber, I'm your host, Michael. This has been episode 423 of the Pound for Pound Box Report. We will see you guys next time. Y'all have a good one. Good evening. Good night.